Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's guest, but as always, we want to give a shout out to our podcast sponsors. Now, don't hit that fast forward button. These are all companies that I used as an athletic director, or I've got a direct connection to, and I really recommend you check them out. So take a listen to our shout outs. Only takes about 3 minutes. Then listen to our interview, and then go visit the sponsors. I'm telling you, you're going to be glad you did. Here we go. We'd like to thank Snap Raise for their support of the podcast. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and ended up with little or zero return on investment? Stop right here. Go to snapraise.com. Hands down, the best online fundraising platform out there. We used it at our school with tremendous success. It works. Go to snapraise.com. You can check out their other great platforms, but if you're looking for a fundraiser, you found it. Go to snapraise.com to get started. We'd also like to say thanks to Vital Signs Wall of Fame. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards or your school's Hall of Fame, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com and take a look at their interactive touch screen. That's right, touch screen video consoles. It's a great way to share your school's unique history along with your proudest moments. That's vitalsignswalloffame.com. We'd also like to say thanks to Huddle. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I wanted a platform that was going to benefit all of our teams, and Huddle came through like a champ. Go to huddle.com. You're going to love, like our coaches and athletes did, the tools that Huddle's going to send you that lets your kids experience sports at the highest level. Join the 8 million users. Turn your school into a Huddle school. We'd also like to say thank you to Gipper. Go to Gipper.com. Their team's going to show you how to create world-class marketing content that'll help you celebrate your programs and honor your teams. The programs used and trusted by over 4,000 high school and college athletic directors across the country. It's professional graphic design made easy. Go to Gipper.com to get started. We'd also like to thank Home Campus. Home Campus is a platform you will use every single day for things like scheduling, student athlete eligibility and clearance. Who doesn't do that every day? Uploading rosters, communicating with your stakeholders, you name it. Home Campus does it better and faster, and it's going to give you a lot more time back in your schedule. All you have to do to get started is go to homecampus.com. That's it, homecampus.com. We'd also like to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and schedule a live web demo to see their score tables and their score boards in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. We use it for home games, of course, but we also use it for pep rallies, for signing ceremonies. Their products are tremendously versatile, and their customer service is just outstanding. Go to sidelineinteractive.com to get started. We'd also like to thank Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more. We want to say thanks to our friends at Ohio University's Master of Science in Athletic Administration. This affordable 20-month online master's program focuses exclusively on interscholastic athletic administration. And when you're done, you're not only going to have your master's degree, you'll have 11 NIAAA leadership training courses that can go toward your RAA or your CAA. You're also going to be part of a nationwide network with graduate connections in athletics all across the country. To get started, all you have to do is go to ohio.edu/info/MAA. Check them out today. And we'd like to say thanks to Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. If you've never used a survey to take the pulse of your parents, your student athletes, or your coaches, you're really missing out. Athletic Surveys is going to connect you They're going to connect you to a group you probably already hear from, the complainers and gripers, but that's only a small percentage. Athletic Surveys is also going to connect you to the 98% that supports your program. And that's a tremendously valuable tool to have when you're talking with a frustrated parent, or maybe your principal, or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. Let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We're staying right here in Florida, and we're going to be visiting with an old friend. Our guest today is Mark Maley. I actually hired Mark a few years ago, and he's going to go into that at my old school, the Maclay School in Tallahassee. And he truly worked his way up the ladder, if you will, to where now he is the assistant athletic director at the Maclay School, one of the top private schools of any kind on the East Coast. So we're going to hear his story. But first, Mark Maley, welcome to the Educational AD Podcast.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me, Jake. It's I know we've been working on this for a while and finally making it happen. But I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I appreciate you coming on in probably the busiest time for any AD, and particularly maybe an assistant AD, that spring season in Florida. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. We always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So give us that quick bio, where you were born, where you grew up. Maybe take us up through your own undergrad days, and then we'll take a break. But what's the Mark Maley story?
Yeah, so I'm actually from Eustis, which you actually live right down the road from now. But from Eustis, Florida, born and raised. Never even left Eustis until I came up to Tallahassee for school. But I played every sport growing up. Did start with the YMCA. My dad worked at the YMCA. Played every sport that I possibly could. Every season I was playing something, and that transitioned. Through middle school, and then unfortunately, when I hit 7th, 8th grade, my dad passed away. So at that point, when I got to high school, I kind of had to make a decision. So it was just me and my mom, and made the decision that I was going to give up athletics in order to work full time illegally and avoid breaking some child labor laws. But decided to give up sports and focus on help my mom out, making that transition easier for her. And then that was kind of my driving factor into the world of athletics. So I did my AA at Lake Sumter Community College, which is now Lake Sumter State College. Then I transitioned to Florida State, got my undergrad here in sport management. Great program. One thing they really focus on is the involvement, get involved, intern, all that stuff. It was a great program. And then that's when I ended up meeting up with you through FSU's internship program, and the history ever since. It's been great. Like I said, I worked my way up here, and I'm in the position I'm in now, and love every second of it. And that kind of drove me to what we'll talk about later with Ohio University and their program.
Yeah, again, we're going to talk about those things, including, your Florida State program a little bit more. But let's go back to Eustis. And again, for those of you not familiar with Florida, and even those of you in Florida who might not know, let's say Lake County, smaller town, but not a teeny tiny town. Growing up in the neighborhood, and as you mentioned, middle school, what was that like? Was it the kids running the program? Were the adults and coaches already organizing things? What are your memories of those times?
Yeah, so mostly, from a rec level, it was more of, the YMCA. That was kind of your outlet. There really, travel ball wasn't big at that point. There's a little bit of AAU baseball going on, but it was primarily just your YMCA rec level stuff. And then once you got into middle school, then you had like Little League, the Eustis Little League. But really, that was about it. And I'm sure they've probably moved towards more travel ball, if I had to guess, because we actually live right there by Eustis High School's baseball field and all the Little League fields. And the last few times I've gone home, they've kind of dissipated. They're in pretty bad shape. So I believe they've kind of transitioned out of the rec level sports, at least from what I've noticed, and gone to more travel.
Yeah, again, we've been in this area now for a couple years since we retired. I've been at Eustis High School a number of times as a basketball official, a nice facility, and I see all the things going on. You drive past their softball field, their football stadiums, right behind it. So the high school program, seems to be very much thriving. And as a track official, I see Eustis at just about every meet we go
Right,
to
right.
here in Central Florida. Um, Lake Sumter, we've actually had their longtime, who retired recently, athletic director Mike Matulia on as a guest. Did you have him as an instructor at all while you were at Lake Sumter, or what are
I
some
did.
memories of that program?
I did. I had him, and I can't remember what course he was teaching. I want to say might have had something to do with weight training or something along those lines. If I had to remember, it's been so many years since I've been in this program, but yes, I did have Mike Matulia as a professor, and he was awesome, great guy.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to guess if it was anything like my junior college experience, it was probably the sports officiating class, where
Mm-hmm.
they taught us how to be officials. But
Mm-hmm.
I really want to take a deeper dive into your Florida State program, and because that kind of brought you to Maclay and brought us together. So let's go and take our first break. Once again, for our listeners, our guest today is Mark Maley, currently the assistant athletic director at the Maclay School in Tallahassee. We're coming back with more, so please stay with us. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to thank our good friends at Snap Raise for their support of the podcast. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraising platform and then got little, if any, return on your investment? Stop right here. Go to snapraise.com. Hands down, the best online fundraiser out there. We used it at our schools with great success. Our coaches loved it. Our parents loved it. It works. Go to snapraise.com. You can check out their other great platforms, but if you're looking for a fundraiser, you found it. Go to snapraise.com. We'd also like to thank Vital Signs Wall of Fame for their support. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards or your school's Hall of Fame, go to vitalsignswalloffame.com and take a look at their interactive touchscreen, that's right, touchscreen video consoles. It's also a great way to share your school's unique history along with your proudest moments. The website is vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check them out today. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast. Once again, our guest is Mark Maley, the Assistant Athletic Director at the Maclay School, and that's in Tallahassee, Florida. Mark, we shared with our listeners that you actually came to Maclay. You answered an ad that we had, and I think the name that we invented was game day management or field ops director or something. Basically, the first thing we were looking for is somebody to come in and paint the fields. Get them ready for football and the other sports, setting up, breaking down after events, but the thing, or one of the things that stuck out on your resume from the Florida State apps that we had, was your extensive background and you kind of alluded to this, Parks and Rec, youth programs, even I think it was the Jacksonville Jaguars. So share a little bit with our listeners how you got involved in those internship, service, or even hourly wage programs that definitely led to your position at Maclay.
Right. So basically, when I got started at Florida State, in their intro to sport management program, their main focus is experience. Because the program itself is so broad. If you don't do anything to get the actual experience, you're going to put yourself at a deficit. So that was one thing I really tried to do, and pretty quick into me being at Florida State, a position opened up, or some internship opportunities opened up with Florida State football. So I actually worked with Florida State football and handled the recruiting databases and things like that in the I think 2012 to 2014 timeframe. And then shortly after that, I got on, or during that process, I was actually also working with Tallahassee Parks and Rec, which I'll say is an experience. Rec sports these days are not as organized as you'd like them to be, and I figured out pretty quick that wasn't the realm for me. But again, still great experience. Enjoyed it. Enjoyed the people I worked with. Took that experience and then eventually got on with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think I was probably in there a year or two before I got to Maclay, and I was the game day operations coordinator. Basically handled the cheat sheets that's broken down to every 15 to 25 seconds. That includes running your field flags, your national anthem, your flyovers, your halftime shows, your in game promotions, things like that. But the main goal of doing all of that was to figure out my niche. I wanted to get experience at every level of sport and figure out where my niche was, what I really enjoyed. So Maclay was actually kind of the last piece of that puzzle, and that's where I found myself. That's where I wanted to be at the conclusion of all those different experiences.
Well, again, when you came to Maclay, your primary job, and this was an hourly job, and I think we even had
Mm-hmm.
a cap on your hours. It was something like I remember Teresa in our business office. She said, "Oh, it's got to be like 25 hours or less or something." Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but you certainly, on your own, you exceeded that with all the things that you, in your own initiative, took on to, I think number one, help our program. Number two, I think you wanted to make a good impression, and you did. Our coaches were just going, "Wow, this guy's great." What, from your memory, what were some of those things, particularly those first 2 years, that kind of made up your um, 25 hours and beyond?
Yeah. Well, the first thing, my goal, no matter what I'm doing or where I'm at, is always be the hardest worker in the room. That was just the work ethic that was instilled in me at a young age. And I think it goes back to me taking on a heavy workload at a young age and maturing a lot quicker than probably should have as a kid. Um, but I would say, so I initially started because we had an athletic trainer issue. Our athletic trainer had a couple accidents and had some neck injuries. So initially I was essentially just getting practices ready and making sure they had the hydration stations up and running. And then that kind of transition, I kind of stuck around for an events and started to kind of feel it out a little bit. So I didn't necessarily report all of that time. But and that kind of transitioned into I seen Scott Egan out there lining a field one day in a suit and tie, and I went up to him, buddy, what are you doing? And he's online the field. I was like, well, show me how to do it, and I can do it, and I can take that off your plate. You're already a teacher. You're already invested in the facilities operations. Let me take on more. And that was kind of my, that's what I wanted to do. Is I took on more responsibility each and every year, and that unfortunately you retired before I could really get around to working with you from that standpoint and really learn more from you. But that was my main goal. My main takeaway was to take on more and more and more and more, because that's the deeper you get into it, the more confident you'll feel that you made the right decision and right career choice.
I'd actually forgotten about that. Our trainer, he was in a automobile accident, and just his back, he couldn't do the physical work that year. I forgot that you really took that on. But then also, as the seasons progressed, we assigned, I think, setting up for volleyball games, getting the chairs set up, and one day I went in to I think hook up the scoreboard and the PA, and it was already done because you had done that. And you just really got into the life of our school, and again made a big impression on our coaches. And Scott and I, Scott Egan, you mentioned, our facilities director, he and I actually went to the head of school, I think, after that second year and said, "Hey, we got to get this guy more hours. Can we make him full time and benefits?" Those things eventually happened. But you really, you know, gave us, that, you made that big impression on us. It was easy for us to go and ask on your behalf, and it's so cool to see that things have developed for you at Maclay. Um, Looking at the Maclay program, and if you're not familiar, listeners, it's a private school, independent school in Tallahassee, the Panhandle. We have about 400 kids in the high school, but there's also a very robust middle school and a K through 5 program. I think our facilities are probably pretty good. They could certainly be better, like everybody
Mhm.
else's. But in the time that you have been at Maclay, which has got to be what, like 5 years now? Okay. Uh, what are some of the changes that you have seen that, as I like to say, make a great program, because they were great before you or I got there, make
Mhm.
a great program even better? What are some things that stick out for you?
Well, I would say going back to when you were here and then the transition from when you weren't here, I would say we felt the impact of you no longer being here. I would say from a leadership standpoint, that's kind of what drove me to do what I wanted, what I'm doing now in the direction I'm heading. So I would say from that standpoint, we had great leadership. Outside of that, I mean, the great thing about Maclay is we have the experience. Obviously we've got some facilities and we're actually in the middle of a probably roughly 10 to $15 million facility renovation. So that's up and coming. But I would say going back to the experience, we offer just about every sport you could possibly imagine for a small school. Now, is it tough for us sometimes? Yes, but again, we can offer opportunities to kids. For usually like a small school like NFC down the road, like they specialize in 3 or 4 sports and that's it. We have the luxury of having, I think we're at 24, 25 programs right now. So that's, to me, that's awesome that we can offer that experience to the kids.
No, that was something I was always very proud of, that even though we were, I think people would say we're a smaller school, we still had a very robust program. And again, we were very fortunate. Almost all of our head coaches were actually on campus, either as teachers or working. So, very cool. Let's go and take another break. But when we come back, we're gonna, hit on Mark for some more best practices, leadership traits that he tries to incorporate in his position. So let's take that break, but we're coming back. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thank you to Huddle for their support of the podcast. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years. But when I became an athletic director, I wanted a platform that was going to work for all of our coaches, and Huddle came through like a champ. Our coaches, our student athletes, even our parents just loved the tools that Huddle provided that allowed our teams to experience sports at the highest level. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users, and turn your school into a Huddle school. We also want to say thanks to Gipper. Go to Gipper.com, start creating world-class content for your school's social media channel. It's going to help you celebrate your athletes and promote your teams. Gipper's used and trusted by over 4,000 high school and college programs across the country. It's professional graphic design made easy. How easy? Well, it's so easy, even I can do it. Go to Gipper.com to get started. And we'd like to thank Home Campus. Home Campus is a platform that you're going to use every single day. Things like scheduling, student athlete eligibility and clearance, uploading rosters, communicating with everybody in your program, you name it. Home Campus is going to do it better. It's going to do it faster, and it's going to give you a lot of time back in your schedule. To get started, all you have to do is go to homecampus.com. That's it. Go to homecampus.com.
Hey, Jake, I saw you mentioned Huddle. We use that primarily as our statistical. Um, you mind pausing? I kind of. Hey, Jake, I saw you mentioned Huddle as a sponsor. We utilize Huddle. Our coaches use it for film, for streaming. It's been a great asset for Maclay for every sport that uses the gym or outside facility. It's been awesome.
I'm so glad to hear that. I know you were there when we first signed up with Huddle, and I had used it, as I said in my shout out, for years, and I was concerned if our other coaches would like it. And I just remember they all they just loved it. I remember our volleyball coaches, our basketball coaches, they'd be in the gym, programming the camera with
Mhm.
their cell phones. And you're absolutely right. I'm so glad. Now, because Maclay is in Florida, everybody in Florida uses home campus, but it's used in other states as well. Has that
Mhm.
been something that you have had to dabble in, whether it's, rosters or schedules, et cetera? Have you done anything with home campus yet as the assistant AD?
Yes, so I use it primarily. So I handle all the rosters, I handle all the clearance, all the scheduling. So far, never had any issues with it. Everything's been clear, consistent. It's been great.
You mentioned the clearance. That it's something that is probably a daily task
Mhm.
for an AD in charge of that. What's one of the features? I know I'm putting you on the spot here. What's one of the features about the athletic clearance procedures that you find particularly easy to work with?
Well, I think it's a one-stop shop. When you go on the actual web page, you just hit the clearance tab, and you can type in a name, you can search whoever you need to search. You can go back into last year. Once as you've once you've uploaded everything, I mean, you can just go back from year to year, and it's just a one-stop shop for everything. If anything, the only problem with it is the parents, and them doing their portion of it. That's the only once they figure that part out, we're golden. But until then. But yeah, home has been phenomenal. That's the best thing we've been able to utilize to make everything succinct.
Yeah, the home campus staff is also very easy to work with. And you mentioned the parents. We were very fortunate. We were actually able to, because we're a private school, all of our parents are, we have computers, we have laptops, they have internet, and we just challenged our parents to submit those documents, and then we can, determine the eligibility. So good stuff.
Right.
Thanks for sharing.
Mhm.
For our listeners, our guest today is Mark Maley. He's the assistant athletic director at the Maclay School in Tallahassee. Mark, we talked a little bit about program. You've been at Maclay now for, as we said, I guess about 5 years, and you've had a chance to, see some of the other public and private schools from a game day level, when they visit us or when you visit them and travel with the team. What are some of the strengths that you see out of the program, and whether it's the coaches or upper administration? Certainly, Maclay's history is certainly a strength, but what are some of the things that really think that make you think Maclay has had the success that they've had year after year after year?
I would say the community, the Maclay community. I think everyone's bought in from the academic side to the athletic side. They mesh well. I've got a great relationship with our upper administration. Got a great relationship with our admissions team. I think we do a great job at working with each other, and at the end of the day, the goal is the same, and that's the student athletes.
Now, as we mentioned, Maclay also has a middle school program, and there's a number of schools, in the Tallahassee area that we will compete against. Um, have you seen any growth or changes or challenges with the middle school program since you've been at Maclay?
I would say one thing that they changed or tried to change is they tried to create a conference. I would say it was probably poorly run. It could have been run better, and I think it could have been successful. But they did create a conference in Tallahassee for the middle school teams. Just would have liked to have seen it a little bit better run. Outside of that, it's pretty much been the same since you've been here. One thing, we have had to cut down. I know we've had, I think, at one point in time, three baseball teams or maybe three basketball teams. We did decide to cut out one of those teams because we can, as long as we can field competitive middle school teams. And I don't mean competitive in terms of wins and losses, but functional. We try and get away from having a team getting beat 20 runs to one, because then that kills their confidence. So, but that's the the good part about having all these different programs is we can say, hey, buddy, let's try this sport. So that's the good thing about that is we still can include everyone in something.
Yeah, the competitive balance, it's something that a lot of people turn their nose up, but at the middle school level, and you probably remember me saying this a couple of times to our middle school coaches, hey, there's really only two schools that we want to beat. We want to beat, as I called them, that school to the north, North Florida Christian,
Yeah.
and Holy Comforter. We want to beat those guys, and we loved them. They're great people, but we want to beat them. The other middle school teams, we're probably going to beat anyway. But if we don't, hey, it's not that big a deal. Let those kids
Right.
play, let them have some fun. This is middle school now.
Yeah.
But
It's
if you're going
about
to
the
leave your
experience for
starters
sure.
in, leave them in against those other two schools.
Mhm.
Is that did that stick around, or is that changed a little bit?
No, it's definitely stuck around. We're still doing that.
Mhm. Now, this is one thing I do like to share. When I was at Maclay, we had, or I had an assistant athletic director that was pretty much there full time, and she worked very much on game supervision and some organization. There was no administrative assistant, but um, I prided myself, since I wasn't teaching or coaching, I tried to take a lot of duties off of the coach's plate so they could focus on coaching. Now, and I'm saying this, you can see me, I've got a big smile on my face. There's an assistant AD, there's a middle school AD, there's I can't think of Chad's title, but you've got all these people in the athletic department. Okay. I assume things are running, I'll say it this way, even better than when I was there. Okay. How do you work with all the various people that are now in the athletic department?
Yeah, so it's actually Jason, our football coach, has an assistant AD title. He's more of a part-time AD, more there for coverages.
Right.
And then we have Harold, who is transitioning to another school here in the next year. And then myself and Chad I would say, are the primary assistant ADs who are here majority of the time. I know you always wanted to be here and you were always here. And I remember you multiple times telling me, hey, take the night off. And of course, I didn't do that. I would still stick around and, be present. Um, but I would say we do a great job at handling the small details because you can delegate it out a little bit better.
Yeah, and you mentioned, for example, your football coach does some game coverages. Those are very important. We had Andy Surratt, who was part time at one point, but now I know he's full time. That's how we built his schedule up to have some game day management. I think we gave him the title of director of soccer operations or
Right, right,
something.
right.
But yeah, you can't minimize that game day presence, because that's when something happens. A kid tweaks an ankle, or a parent starts chirping at a referee. It happens when nobody's there. So
Yeah.
having those game day managers on site is huge. Looking at all the events that Maclay does, I'm putting you on the spot again. What's your favorite game day memory where it just all came together? So from a fan perspective, it was success, but from your perspective, it was maybe teetering on chaos because, six different things had to be done at the last minute. Any game day success stories stick out for you?
I would say probably Maclay versus Childs basketball game where we had some incidents. I mean, you know how that goes. It's pretty rowdy in there. I mean, you essentially have a student section that fills up one whole section of bleachers, and their student section fills up the other. Well, they thought they were going to sit behind our basketball bench, and so I moved them, and then they proceeded to get moved again by our head AD because he wanted them to be directly across from one another, and that caused an issue where we ended up having to remove assistant principal from Giles because he kept making it a bigger issue than what it was. But then we ended up handling it, talking to their AD was on site as well, so we talked to him. Everything went fine. But as you know, those nights are busy, so we're constantly going and getting change for the cash box, and for both concessions and gate. And so you just run around like a chicken with your head cut off. But that's the name of the game. And I think if anything helped me with that, it was working in Jacksonville, having to follow a timeline and trying to make sure the flyover is on time and not 2 minutes late. And there's just so much that can happen. And I think that kind of an atmosphere prepared me for this. This is kind of a walk in the park for me in terms of stress levels. I don't get stressed or get consumed with that stuff. So
I don't ever recall seeing you stressed during my time at Maclay. And again, those rivalry games, our Child's High School, big public high school, all of our kids, they know each other. And so it's a good rivalry, but it can also, teeter on the edge there because of, whether it's a kid or an assistant principal, you never know. Let's go and take a break. When we come back, Mark is a graduate of the Ohio University Master in Science for Athletic Administration program. And I'm going to have him share his experience, why he chose Ohio and some of the things that, he feels sets it apart from maybe other programs. So let's take that break, but we're coming back with more. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing, the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Go to hometownticketing.com. It's digital ticketing that offers more. The Hometown team is going to sit down with you and help you set up online ticketing, not just for your athletic events, but for things like school plays, concerts, school dances, even graduation. And here's the best part. Every school gets assigned a dedicated client success manager that's going to provide you hands-on support every step of the way. That's every step of the way. Go to hometownticketing.com to get started. It's digital ticketing that offers more. We also want to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and schedule a live web demo to see their scoreboards and their score tables in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our school's Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Their products not only generate income for your athletic department, but they also create the ultimate game day experience for your student athletes. That's sidelineinteractive.com. And we want to say thanks to Ohio University's online Master of Science in Athletic Administration. This affordable 20-month online master's program focuses exclusively on interscholastic athletic administration. And when you finish, you're not only going to have your master's degree, you're going to have 11 NIAAA leadership training courses that can go towards your RAA or your CAA. You're also going to be part of a nationwide graduate network with connections in athletic administration all the way across the country. To get started, all you have to do is go to ohio.edu/info/MAA. You're going to be glad you did. Check out Ohio University's online master's program today.
you mentioned the scores table, which you got for us back when you were here. We still use it to this day. We use it for signings, use it for our basketball games, volleyball games. We use it for our, utilize it for ads and, use the Gipper presentations that John Fletcher creates for us and does a great job with that.
Yeah, I will mention, and thanks for sharing that, Mark, about Sideline Interactive. I'll share with other athletic directors that we just kind of stumbled on the idea of using the video board, video score table for the signing ceremonies. And it's just so easy to use. And probably one of the things I got the most positive feedback from parents about. Basically, you just create a PowerPoint show, you plug it into the scoreboard, and it just plays on a loop during the signing ceremony. And the parents, the kids, they just love it. And you mentioned John Fletcher, one of our student announcers, who seems like he's been there for 10 years now. There's so many different applications within the basic Sideline Interactive score table. You're never going to get to all of them. But if you have a student or a couple of students that can run that table, you can teach them how. Again, it really is going to make your game day presentation very cool. For our listeners, one more time, we're visiting today with Mark Maley. Mark, you are a graduate of Florida State University with your undergrad in sport management, but you got your master's degree from the Ohio University Master's in Athletic Administration. And I know you and I talked about, possible different programs a few years ago. And the one thing I encouraged you to do was do your research and make sure that you chose a program that was not only going to allow you to earn your master's degree, but it was also going to include the NIAAA's leadership training courses. So when you wanted to test for your CAA and eventually get your CMA, you would have already met those qualifications and you wouldn't have had to basically start over and
Mhm.
take those extra courses. So I'm going to guess that was one reason you might have chosen the Ohio University program. But what were some of the other factors behind it? And share, if you can, your experience going through and graduating from the Ohio University Masters in Athletic Administration program.
Well, I would say, after the conversations we had and verifying that it was a 2-for-1 program was the fact that it was application based. And what I mean by that is basically everything you do is constructed to be utilized like while you're working on campus at a school. So the guy pretty much told me during the interview process, we only let people in this program that are already affiliated with a school, because that's the whole premise of the program is you're going to use that school as your reference for this program and all the projects, whether it's Title IX or facilities and event management, like all those courses, you're going to use your school as your project. And I think that was probably the most helpful thing for me, because right now I can go look back at those projects that I completed and verify, hey, this worked or this it didn't work, and let's adjust and evaluate and so on and so forth. But I would say that was the main reason why that program was highly, just regarded from my standpoint. I think I would advertise it to anybody. It's the grandfather of sport management. So it's where it's all started. It was right there at Ohio University.
Now, you mentioned that it was, application as opposed to theory based. And you mentioned, Title IX and some other areas. The program's 100% online.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as you were getting into those Zoom recordings, what were some of the things that stuck out for you immediately about the instructors or about some of the other students? What really, as you're going through those first few sessions, told you, hey, I made the right choice?
Well, initially it was a wake up call for me, because I think I let 4 or 5 years pass between my undergrad and this. Um, So it was definitely a wake up call. But honestly, like I did really well within the program, but it was different with it being online. I would say the instructors were very thorough in everything they did. The syllabuses were very thorough, the assignments very thorough. Everything was very well thought out, very well programmed. Um, we had a few in most cases our only interactions with the students was through a discussion board, but there were some scenarios where we did meet via Zoom, so we did get to meet each other that way. And I went through the program during COVID, so that was you know in regards to the seminar that every student's supposed to take, where they actually set foot on campus for an entire week. I missed that opportunity. um, but yeah, like I said, the program phenomenal. I have nothing negative to say about it. It's been great, and it's been great for me moving forward in my career.
You had, a number of experiences prior to enrolling in the Ohio program. And then while you're in the program, you're still in that same, Maclay environment, scheduling, setting up, supervising, all the things that you did even before you became the assistant AD. Um, After taking the courses, how have they what have they done for you to make you better at your job?
Well, like I said, the one thing that you can do is you can go back and look at those assignments that you did, whether it was a Title IX audit. I would say that one, because we had that was one thing. Our girls program, I think we do a great job with, but I don't think we were where we needed to be with them. So one of the first things I did, when I started taking on this role is, evaluate the girls program. So one that I noticed that needed a facelift was softball. So, put a needs list together and got about a little over $33,000 and did a facelift, got Crimson Stone, and did all sorts of stuff. But the parents were just in awe. So that's one thing. That's one course where I would say, I went and evaluated that project, and let's look at it right now, where we're at right now at Maclay and how we can utilize it. So that I would say the Title IX course was one course that I've definitely utilized.
Let's go and take a deeper dive into that, because I know exactly what you're talking about with, facilities. What were some of the things you were able to do with that influx of athletic monies to help, as you said, a facelift for softball? I'm sure some of our listeners would love to be able to do the same thing.
Yeah. So one thing, as I mentioned, I did Crimson Stone all around the warning track instead of just the generic clay, which kind of looks kind of old and crappy sometimes if you don't keep up with it. Did that, and then I also, how we've always had the blank windscreens. Well, I did some artwork to where it says Lady Marauders, put the logos on them in the light blue, and then cut out walk ups, Crimson Stone those, and then Crimson Stone the entire backstop where the bleachers are, and then put pavers and paved it in. And like I said, it looks good. Now we're actually looking at renovating the dugouts for both baseball and softball, because I think they've been the same since the 80s, to be honest with you. So that's the next step. We've already gotten approved to start moving in that direction, raising money and making it happen. So
No, one thing that we were able to do while I was there, we had talked about, they had that concession stand slash announcers booth that had been there probably since the 70s. And, we didn't condemn it, but we did tear it down. But getting back to where they had a structure there, I know we brought out the table and the speakers, and we mentioned John Fletcher already. He was announcing softball games. Anything in that area, what are they still doing as far as announcing for the softball games? Any, let's say, permanent structures?
yeah, so we actually took that structure at middle school baseball, the shed, and moved that around to softball because middle school baseball wasn't utilizing it. So we basically renovated that a little bit and made that the new concession slash scorekeeping shed. But our goal is to make a permanent structure. That was kind of just a temporary. We did all these nice things. Now let's put something, like repainted it, put a new roof on it, put new tin on it, and like I said, perked it up quite a bit. Like I said, we did quite a bit for the little over 30 grand that we got. We did a nice facelift, and the parents were much appreciative of that.
Oh yeah, I can imagine that. One more time, from the Ohio University experience, okay?
Mhm.
If you were going to recommend the program to
Mhm.
an aspiring athletic director, you talked about the content, that it was application based. You talked about the quality of the instructors in presenting the material. What's one or two more things that you would recommend about the program to sell it to somebody who's considering getting their master's in athletic administration?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost is flexibility. So as you know, when I was going through the program, I was still had my full-time job. I was still working for you part-time, still working for the Jaguars because this is pre-COVID. So 2019 was my last year, last season doing that, going into 2020. So I was still doing all of those things on top of this master's program. And they probably don't want to hear this, but to be honest with you, I spent about 12 to 14 hours on Saturday and Sunday doing all the work. I didn't get much done during the week just because I was so busy. But at the end of the day, it's so flexible. You can find time and a way to get it done.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I appreciate you sharing, and I appreciate, again, you taking time out of your busy spring schedule to share with our listeners. But we're not done yet. We always wrap up with what we call the athletic director's toolbox. Now, you're an assistant AD, but you certainly know your way around the world of athletic administration. So we're
Mhm.
going to take our final break. We're going to hear from athletic surveys. And when we come back, I'm going to challenge you to send out a brand new athletic director on their very first job, but I'm only going to let you put 3 things in the toolbox. So let's take that last break. And when we come back, we're going to see what Mark Maley puts into his new athletic director toolbox. We'll be right back. We'd like to say thanks to Athletic Surveys for sponsoring the AD Toolbox segment of our podcast. Athletic directors already get feedback, but usually it's from the complainers, the gripers, and that's only a small percentage of your stakeholders. Athletic surveys will connect you to that group, but they're also going to connect you to the 98% that supports your program. And that's tremendously valuable information to have, especially when you're talking with a frustrated parent or maybe your principal or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey for your school that lets you take the pulse of everybody in your program. That's Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Let them help you take your athletic program from good to great. Well, it's that time of the podcast. We've been spending time and catching up for me with a good friend, Mark Maley, the assistant athletic director at the Maclay School in Tallahassee, Florida. He's got a tremendous background already as an athletic administrator, but right now I'm going to challenge him to send out a brand new athletic director on the very first job, but I'm only going to let him put 3 things in the toolbox. So, Mark, what 3 items are going to go into your new athletic director toolbox?
I would say first and foremost is definitely organization. If you're not organized, it's going to be a hard job to really do a great job at. And I say that, not necessarily, just from a scheduling standpoint or anything along those lines, but the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. Let's create a coach's packet that has, a roster template, a schedule template, transportation template, basically all those things, and just keep it concise. And put it on a shared document. That way they can fill it out. It's a live document. You can always view it. That's one thing that I do here is I have a coach's packet that's full of about 6 or 7 different templates, and they just fill it out. And it's a live document. And then before the season starts, we'll pull that coach in and meet and go over it and approve the schedule. And from a player fee standpoint, it's all transparent. That's one thing that the parents will have access to. But like I said, just creating templates. So organization is the best policy with that. My next one would have to be communication. If you can't communicate, again, this job's gonna be real tough. And I don't mean just with your staff. I mean, obviously you want to have great communication with your coaches. I suggest meeting weekly with your in-season coaches, and probably bi-weekly to maybe monthly with your out-of-season coaches, just to stay in touch. But I would take that even further with parents. Express your vision. Always talk about your vision. Where do you see this program? That's the opportunity for you to build a relationship with the parents, and get them excited about where the program's headed. Then admissions, your upper school administration, it's all about communication. Whatever athletes or athletics directly affects, you need to communicate with that group. I think that prevents a lot of issues. I'll use an example last year with fine arts. They ended up taking over a gym. No one communicated that with us, so we had a little bit of an issue, but communication would have solved that problem before it started. So that's one thing. We've already scheduled a meeting for this week to go over. So again, communication is not just restricted to people in athletics. It expands past that. Last but not least, I think, is the relationship piece. And I talked about that earlier in the podcast, where, I've got a great relationship with upper administration. I can go talk to James, our headmaster, anytime. I can go talk to Jay, our CFO, HR individual, at any time. But it's not always about work. I can go in there and have just kind of shoot the breeze and keep that relationship strong. Same thing with admissions. And I'll use it from an independent school standpoint. We're a smaller school, so in order to protect our programs, we need to have a really strong relationship with admissions. If we see 2 or 3 programs struggling numbers wise, then let's formulate a plan. What age group or classes are we low in numbers in? And during that admissions process, let's figure out if we can highlight some kids and get some kids in to help protect our programs. We need to put a premium on those athletes. So that's where relationships really comes in, and along with the communication piece. And then again, with the parents, the communication relationship thing connects there as well. Like I said, I always like to express our vision and tell them where we're headed, where that program's headed, renovations that we're talking about or anything along those lines. You'll be surprised how many times someone will write you a check. I love it. I love what you're thinking. Let's do it. So those are the 3 things I think an AD can't do without. I think you have to have those, and you need to be very strong in those 3 particular areas, to be honest with you.
Oh, absolutely. And there you mentioned well, you wove vision in and out of your other 3, but all 3 of those are among our most frequently mentioned tools because they are so very important. So it's great that you've got those in your toolbox, at the beginning of your career. Mark, we should have done this earlier, so shame on me, but we're going to do it now. If one of our listeners wanted to reach out and pick your brain a little bit more, find out how you do things at the Maclay School, or just add you to their network, and listeners, I think you got a great resource here. What's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
Through email. So it's MMALEY. So Maley at Maclay, MACLAY.org.
Well, Mark, thanks again for sharing. All the best as we continue spring, and hopefully we're going to see you at the FIAAA conference here coming up soon.
Yes, sir. Of course. Appreciate you having me on.
Oh, well, right back at you. For our listeners, we appreciate you tuning in, and we want to remind you that we upload the Zoom recordings of all of our interviews to the Education Lady Podcast YouTube channel. We do this just about every day with interviews and best practices. So we hope you come back for another episode of the Educational AD Podcast. We'll see you next time.